Kyla, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I know we're excited about discussing some of this stuff about empowering people around their intuition and how they can use it in their everyday life.
Yeah.
A shared passion of ours, which is great. Before we go into that, I really want to get people to get a sense of your own journey and your own not being aware of your intuition or your spiritual side to now having it as a key part of your business.
Yeah.
Before you discovered all of this space, you know, what was life like for you before?
Yeah. So obviously my life has transformed completely. Like I went from party girl, investment banker to now spiritual entrepreneur, work for myself, trust myself. But really, I guess what is core difference is the inner workings of me. Like when I think about it, at that time, everyone still saw me as confident, brave, courageous Kyla, had all my stuff together and life was kind of ticking all of the boxes. But inside, I was completely shut down. And I kind of had, what I realize now and looking back is that as a kid, I was super sensitive, highly empathetic, highly intuitive, and the pressure of the world was just too much. And so what I obviously decided for self-preservation was to shut it all down and to actually not feel anything. And with that means that you kind of like, I was living life through rose-tinted glasses. It was kind of like, I was the okay girl. So how are you? I'm okay. Always focusing on everybody else because I still had that deep desire to want to serve, but not realizing that actually it has to start by filling up our own cup and serving ourselves. So along the path, basically my whole childhood, I had really bad stomach problems and no one could ever figure out what it was. And now obviously understanding it was that I am an empath, and that's kind of where we hold and store all of our stress. And then when I got back from living overseas in London, somehow I got introduced to a crystal healer. And she basically said to me, if I didn't start feeling my feelings and expressing myself, I would end up with cancer. And the first session with her, I lay down on her crystal bed, and it was like I had come home and I had known this place and I felt so safe, but I had to obviously go through a purging of a lot of stuff along the way that had just been stored in me that I had never processed. So for me, it was kind of like there's been lots of little steps along the way, and the door just opens. And I truly believe that when the door opens, we've just got to be willing to trust that intuition and take the next step. And that's kind of what got me here now. So I left banking in 2010. So I've been now working for myself for just under 6 years. And it truly, like, even in terms of that, I think you can have a vision of where you're going, but when you're in that kind of divine flow and listening to your soul and trusting your intuition, you've also got to be willing to let go because things change. And if we stay too attached to something, that's where the control comes back in and we end up falling over.
So how does an investment banker or someone who's watching who knows that they like to control things, or they like things done a certain way, how do you learn to let go?
So honestly, I think, and I talk about this in a lot of the corporate workshops that we run, as well as kind of one-on-ones with clients, is we've got to be willing to slow down. And for me, presence and self-awareness and going within. I've always said, like, I kind of have this theory that I say that no one needs a guru. They just need a roadmap, which we can give them, and then they need a mirror, and then they've just got to be willing to go within. And for me, one of my greatest teachers, Denise, when I learnt the soul journeys with her, that's the greatest catalyst for change for me, is actually going within and realizing that all the answers are in there. But these days the world is just running so fast, and there's so much fear and there's so much doubt that we forget that actually there is this innate knowing within us that knows everything, but we've got to be willing to trust it, because often our intuition is scary because the messages that we're getting, like there I was sitting in this beautiful home in Double Bay, this amazing career, fast tracking my life, and then the feeling was that I needed to quit. And it was like, oh, and it's scary, but we've got to, for me, the first step is loving yourself. Like, I just want to create this love revolution that's full of kindness. And I think that when we start stepping away from the inner critic, from the inner bully, and we are willing to actually start loving ourselves from the inside and having this deep reverence and gratitude for the life that we've been gifted, it's like we start tapping into starting to listen to that intuition more, and realizing that for a lot of people, it doesn't have to be the extremes of my path. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to quit your job and go become a spiritual healer or anything like that. It just means that actually what we want to start doing is bringing these beautiful feminine principles of life into our everyday, so that you could be a CEO, you could be a manager, a leader, a staff member, and you start to actually allow your intuition and trusting your feelings and your knowings, and then you make decisions based on that. You express yourself, you allow that creative energy to come through you. But also it's starting to understand that what I found, and I find with clients and myself, is that we've been taught to shut down our feelings. And so it's kind of like, oh, she'll be right, mate. And then our feelings is one of our knowings. And so as we start to open up to that again, and I know in my own journey, that's what that was. It was like, oh, it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel angry. And then we start to understand that we're getting so many signals from our body, from our knowing, from our feelings all the time about life, but we've got to be willing to pause and actually stop and listen, because otherwise we miss them.
We do miss them. And so much of what you're saying there about going back and looking for the answers within, all we hear people say now is, well, what do you think? They're asking externally, what do you think I should do? What do you think of this? And there's never time to pause and go, am I actually happy with this? I see it a lot with moms as they transition from that like phenomenal career to them being moms, and it's sometimes it's a shock, to kind of be with yourself, and then when you don't know yourself.
Well, and also, like, our whole schooling system teaches us to externally validate. So we're taught that there's somebody standing up in a classroom, or there's a book in front of us, and all the answers are inside of that. And so we're actually trying to reprogram this whole conditioning of our society and how we're being brought up to understand that actually everything you need is already in there. And that purpose that you were born, and only you were born to do on this earth, is already inside of you. And it's like this beautiful intuition and these messages. And then when we start to listen and trust ourselves, we don't need to fight to be right against anybody else, because it's like, well, my truth is my truth and yours is yours. We've got to be willing to dissolve these kind of competitive, looking outside of ourselves behaviors and habits. It just become habits, really.
And it shouldn't be a competition, because there's plenty to go around. We're all going to be able to thrive together. It's not you or me, it's us together.
And when you think about it, I always say, how can we compete with each other? Like, how could you and I compete when we've both got completely different divine blueprints, completely different personalities, experiences? Like, when we actually think about it deep down, it's impossible to compete with anyone, because we're completely unique.
And so in terms of intuition, I know a lot of people often ask me this, they get confused whether they should, using their intuition means that they're going to become kind of woo-woo, or if they have to become psychic or come out of the closet. But my vision is that really it's a world whereby everybody uses their intuition in their everyday life. And the more you use it, the stronger the muscle gets. So how do you describe intuition to people? How do they start to recognize it in their life?
Well, I think the amazing thing is that things are shifting. Like, in working with lots of CEOs and leaders, what I start to understand, and even male ones, they understand it as a gut feeling and a gut knowing. And it really is starting to tap into it as just this deep understanding of human behavior, and how do we actually need to respond in this moment. And I kind of have a saying for myself, which is, how may I best serve this moment? And then if I'm completely open and I'm completely curious, then all the messages of the best way to be present in that moment and serve and allow the intuition to come through just comes through. And so really I think part of the problem is the language, is that people are freaked out by the spiritual, because it's kind of like, even though it's been around for so long, it's new. And I always say that I'm kind of like your atypical type A woo-woo, which is a lot of people, I think, because they have these ideas of what a spiritual person looks like, they think they're going to end up in tie-dye and they're going to have to give up and go meditate on a mountain their whole life. And for me, I just want to totally smash that paradigm and let people understand that there doesn't need to be any separation from who you are now, and trusting your intuition and really just listening to yourself and then taking action. Because I think that's the key thing that often people miss, is that they get the intuition, they get the knowing, and then they maybe don't take action, or there's been times where they haven't. And it could be as simple as like getting a feeling that you should take a second set of keys. And I remember when we moved out of a flat many years ago, I had this feeling that I needed to go get the other set of keys. And then my head came in and it was like, oh, no, you don't. You've got your keys. What are you thinking? So then I went out and got some stuff, and then was coming back to meet the real estate at the flat. And I had obviously banged the door, and it had locked the bottom door key, and that was only on the other set of keys. And I was like, oh, damn it. And so it's kind of realized that it's not just all about purpose and these really big meanings for our life. Our intuition gives us these little like hints and steps to make our life easier day to day. Really. Yeah.
And it could be like, you take a normal route home when you're driving home, and it's like, oh, actually, something's telling you should take a different road, that day. And whether you listen or not, and next thing you end up, stuck behind a traffic jam. You're like, listen to that.
A perfect example of that. I had this most profound experience where I used to go to yoga, and then I'd go for a swim in the ocean down in Manly. And one day I felt that I had to drive and park in a different place to where I usually parked. And I was like, well, that's weird, but I'll listen to it anyway. And so I parked there, and then I walked down onto the beach. And there was a man walking towards me, and he just had this biggest smile on his face, and I'd never seen him before. And if I hadn't have parked there, I wouldn't have seen him. And I looked at him and I thought, I'm just going to trust myself enough to say to him, it's really nice to see someone so happy in the morning. And then we sat down on the beach and we spoke for an hour, and he said, I actually have some messages from your guides that you really need to hear today. And we sat there for an hour, and he gave me all of these insights. And then he kind of was there on holidays. He was at a conference, and then he left and we parted ways. And I was like, wow.
I've got goosebumps all over. And so actually, and then speaking of goosebumps, that for me, that's what I've now recognized over time, that's one of my signs, and we hear this whole thing about noticing signs and your intuition a lot. And it took me a while to figure out the goosebumps one, because it's, it's a bit of a traditional one. But the more I listen to it and the more I act on it, which is what you said, then the stronger it gets. So that I know now when I get it everywhere that it's really something significant that I'm listening to, something very important. And to do that, what are the how do you get signs?
So mine are often feelings and knowings. Like my clear knowing is really, really strong. And so I think that's been my greatest challenge. And I work with a lot of clients that are highly telepathic in that sense, because when it's a knowing, you then are like, oh, well, is that a thought or is that my intuition? And so it's taken a really long time to discern the difference between that kind of heart-spaced intuition knowing and also what is a thought and more of a kind of egoic thought. But also what it then made me realize is how my intuition has always been there. Like now along the path, say I've met spiritual teachers and they're like, Kyla, that actually your knowing's always been super strong. And I'm like, I just didn't listen to it.
It's just accepting it. It's accepting it. It's that part of it. And mine is the clear knowing as well. And as much as it bugs my husband, I go, I just know. I just know that's it.
My mum hated it. Me growing up, she's like, you think you know everything? And I'm like, well, I actually do. But I also now accept that I know nothing as well. And that's the biggest gift. As you said,
and then other ways that our intuition speaks to us with signs, like for me, it could be through books. I would get a random book, or I would literally read a paragraph in a book, and I'd be like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need to read.
Yeah.
Or other stuff. How else do you notice stuff happening in your surroundings that kind of validates your intuition?
Well, I think that's the gift, is that when you're open and curious, it can come in so many different forms. Like for me, I usually just put the questions out there when I'm requiring clarity for something.
Okay.
And then often I think what happens is we can go into, say, meditation, and we're sitting there and we're like, give me the answer. But then really what I've realized over the years is that it can come in movies. It can come in songs. Like I'll ask a question and then hit shuffle on my Spotify, and the most divine song will come. I do a lot of oracle card readings. It might come like in a random man that you meet on the beach. Emails coming through. Like I think this is the power of when we're in that divine feminine energy of flow. It really can come in so many different forms. And I've had so many, like I'll get an intuition of a certain TV program I need to watch, and then all of these messages around certain healing that's going on in the earth at the time, or things that I've got to focus on will come. And it really is like, because part of my mission is to ignite everybody's creative sparks. Then for me, that's why I've been blessed with my intuition and my messages coming in like this multitude of forms, because for me there is no limitation. There's no way that it can't come, as long as you're present and aware enough to realize. Because if you're running a million miles an hour, which I used to be, I kind of say that I'm an busy stressaholic, and there's all those patterns of that sometimes, that then we've got to be willing to be present enough, because otherwise you miss the signs. Yes,
you absolutely do. And they can be fleeting, you know, until you start to notice them and then build them up in terms of confidence. And I love how now your business is that balance of, you know, within the corporate world and bringing that, getting to know yourself and that empowered leadership, and also, you know, one-on-one with clients. I think that balance is something that we're starting to see a shift in, not just kind of separate.
Yeah. And that's
what's your business like now? Give us an example of, you know, what kind of stuff you do now.
Yeah. Well, so what I realized a few years ago is that part of my mission is to not make the spiritual weird and crazy for people, that we actually, it just becomes a part of who we're being. Like really, everyone wants love, everyone wants connection. And so I realized that it can be really tough for people to step through the door of a healer, of a psychic, and because some people have a lot of religious connotations to this. And so I kind of sat with, how can I best serve and support the masses? And I really started to feel that I needed to go back, and that part of the gift of me being in banking and being in corporate was that I now understand the language, and I can really take these kind of high-level concepts that allow us to step into our intuition, our gut feeling, trusting ourselves, decision-making, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and all of this, and really bring it to this space of how can we just show up as the best version of us day to day. And in that, it requires trusting ourselves. So for me, the gift has been kind of taking what people would call woo-woo, and in the corporate space, I always, every first meeting, the first thing I say is I offer a no fluff guarantee, which is really this understanding that we just want to open everyone up to this beautiful world of knowing and trusting themselves, and also feeling this deep sense of living on purpose and contributing no matter what they're doing. Because when you're connected inwards, you then can connect more outwards, and it totally just transforms your whole life and your whole way of being. And I think that really the way that the business world is transforming, people are not satisfied in the way that things used to be. And we've got the new generation coming through with instant gratification, constantly wanting to question. Like for me, I remember the teachers used to say to me, Kyla, shut up. They used to be, why? I don't understand why.
Tell me.
tell me. And this kind of curiosity the whole time. But that's the generation that's starting to come through, and they won't stand for this control and demand way of leading anymore. So what we're really doing is bringing in this more I call it self-led leadership. So it's how do we create an organization where everyone is 100% accountable for the mood that they're bringing, for the attitude that they're bringing, for their own gifts and like strengths and all of that. And then we just kind of create this beautiful model where everyone's transforming together and they've got this clear intention of where they're going, but they're honoring, appreciating and accepting themselves along the way as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that shift that we're seeing happen is awesome. And then to support that also in individual clients, you know, as they transform and they heal and grow in their belief in themselves, is just a beautiful service to give.
Yeah. And so in the one-on-one space, I just love, like, we do the soul journeys and the past life journeys, and it is not really kind of, for me, it's that cocoon, that womb space where you can go. And I realized a while back that most of the work that I really do is, and you are aware of, bringing in this element of play. So a lot of the healing is about how do we heal these inner child woundings so that we can step fully into that potential that we were born to be. So often you need that sacred space individually at the same time as well to be able to kind of go into that and hold that. And some of the most exciting stuff, I've started doing a lot of online coaching programs, group coaching programs. And getting a group together that don't know each other from across the globe and really connect. All these, like, you see these beautiful aha moments where people go, I'm not alone. And here's this person that I've never met in my life who is actually listening to me, witnessing me, and allowing me to be the full expression of myself. And I don't have to shut down. And so for me, wherever I go, I just want to create that sacred space for people to shine themselves and find those answers within, because that's been my greatest way of really discovering who I am. Because I think there's so much focus on other people's opinions and how should I do this, how should I listen to my intuition, what should I do here, instead of going, well, what do I need?
And I think it's beautiful as well, that moment when you say the aha moment, when people realize it's not just them. Because right now I'm really noticing a lot of people who have gifts and abilities and they're just kind of holding them secret. So when they realize that it's not just them, and then they can kind of go, cool. And it's like it gives them more permission to shine.
Completely.
And to own.
And when clients, like, because I'll always share about my own crazy adventures and how, like, I truly believe that we never stop learning. And so for me, that's what I really want to do, is be this authentic understanding that I've still got gremlins. I still have face fears and doubts every single day. When you step into the path of working for yourself, a lot of share it's the greatest spiritual and personal development journey you can take. And so this understanding that we are always supported within ourselves and by people around us, but knowing that we've got to give ourselves permission to be human, because that's what I see a lot on the spiritual path, is that actually people start judging and criticizing themselves more than they ever did before they even got on this path. And kind of like, it's like self-awareness can become our greatest beautiful gift, but also our worst nightmare at the same time, because you can observe yourself about to do something and you're like, oh, here I go again.
I know. I think, like what you said, like, you know, when you're about to go into meditation and you're like, come on, give me the answer. It's so un-zen. You know, I think it's beautiful to see. And that was part of my journey in even telling people that are psychic or intuitive, because I was like, well, they're going to think psychic is like, you know, I'm going to have jewels hanging off me and a crystal ball, and I'm so far from that. It's not even funny. But I think people are starting to realize that now. You know, that's okay. But you're still human. I still try and struggle to get my kids out the door on time in the morning. Some days
it's struggled. Like it was the coldest day we've had in Sydney in 21 years apparently yesterday. And so of course we're going to wake up and be like, do I really have to get up and go to yoga? Understanding. And I think that's a core thing that I want to share with people as well, is that being gentle with themselves along this journey, understanding that it's physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and it's spiritual. And those four counterparts need to really be taken care of as we step on this adventure and you start tapping into these inner knowings and going deeper within yourself. I do a lot of shadow work with clients, and as you're going through that, a deep vulnerability starts to occur. So we need to be loving ourselves continuously and daily along the journey, because that way things just start to transform even more quickly. And I think at the moment, a lot of people that are highly sensitive, and I say sensitivity is our superpower, they're really starting to pick up on all these energies of fear and doubt of other people around them. So holding themselves in a sacred space as they kind of begin this step and stage of the journey. Really, I see it like I say I'm a gardener, and we plant these seeds, and then you've got to nourish them and water them and just kind of keep that sacred space around them as they're stepping into this path.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy actually to bear in mind. And I think it's being gentle and not having too high an expectation of yourself as you're growing. It's very much a journey and an evolution.
Because I think we can get attached to the outcome, and really there is no outcome. Like the gift in stepping into this, like I remember I used to be so attached to the vision or where I was going and what that's going to look like. But what for me has been the most beautiful shift is that now I'm present with life. I realize there's a deep sense of contentment and fulfillment in this moment. And the other day I was in the Blue Mountains and I was just walking, and I was just so grateful for the trees and everything. And I burst into tears, and I was like, oh no, I've become one of those people. And it's this deep reverence for life. And that's what, like, for me, I want people to understand is that you can become completely wild and free and liberated in yourself. And it's not about, well, am I living my purpose and am I doing this? It's kind of like once you free yourself, the doors just open. And then you can't, like, I can't even imagine, like, if somebody had said to me, when I started my 2-year intuitive development course, like back when I was in banking, in 7 or 8 years' time, you're going to be on a call like this, talking to people about using their intuition, teaching spirituality, like doing healings. I would have freaked out and probably shut the door.
Oh, completely. Like I honestly remember, and it's 6 years ago now, we just moved back to Australia. I went to like the Mind, Body and Soul with one of my mates because she wanted someone for company.
Yeah.
Picked this random reader from like a pool of, God knows how many. And she told me, she said, you're going to be doing this work, but in a really big way. And I'm looking at her going, that's just crap. Can I have that
what are you talking about?
Like, seriously? And I actually just want to find her, so that I can apologize to her. But I was like, that's just, planet is she on? But obviously she was planting the seeds. I think
you've got to be willing to take the pressure off. Like I see when so many people come in for sessions and they're like, Kyla, what is my purpose? And I'm like, let it go. Let's just start by loving you. And then
and I find that the magic happens the more you're in the moment, and how you're actually being, because we're striving so much to get there and do and be this, when I'm there, that's when I'll be happy, and actually right now is the golden moment.
And it's the only moment we have. And I always say it's like the number one thing in the corporate space with one-on-one clients I talk about is it's who you're being that matters. It's less about what you're doing. It's more about how are you showing up and leaving that legacy of who do you want to be. Like for me, the message of kindness, like if I can leave the earth and know that I've left it a kinder place, or I've touched hearts and allowed people to step into being kinder to themselves. Like to me, that is more than anything I could have imagined. And so knowing that I do that by being in full integrity, by being kind to myself and treating everybody with kindness. And it has less to do with what I then do in terms of work-wise. It's just, it's actually who we're being and how we show up.
Yeah, and getting to express that freely. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Kyla. I think there's so many golden nuggets there of just simple tips and advice that people can really take to start noticing their own intuition and listening to that more, and then inviting that happiness and joy, you know, and playfulness into their life. So thank you so much for sharing that. I truly appreciate it.
Pleasure. And if I can leave everyone with one final thing, it really is play more. When you're in that place of openness and playfulness, and there'll be a voice inside of their head that says, you don't have time. Just know that when you're in that open, playful state, your intuition is flowing, your heart is open, that inner magical child is just having a great time. And then all the clarity around everything else that you're seeking in your life will just start to kind of ripple in throughout that time and space.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. That's
so
awesome.
Much, Barbara.
No worries. I'll talk to you soon.
Lots of love. Mwah.
Mwah.